This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Canna Health.
Hey cannabis consumers, have you ever consumed a cannabis product thinking it'll make you feel a certain way, but then it doesn't? Don't you wish you had a clear understanding of your own DNA so that you could make informed decisions about what type of cannabis products interact best with your system? Well, now you can with EndoDNA. EndoDNA is a simple DNA test that maps your entire endocannabinoid system and then matches that summary with a specific cannabinoid ratio and terpene profile that best aligns with your unique genotype. Imagine being armed with personal information when visiting a dispensary. You'll have the knowledge and power and capability to purchase products that best align with your genotype. Visit their website to purchase the EndoDNA Collection Kit and Endo Decoded Report at endodna.com/products and use the promo code CONNECT15 for a 20% discount. Again, that's endodna.com/products and use the promo code CONNECT15 for a 20% discount. The future of cannabinoid therapeutics is here with EndoDNA. Hey Thomas, what's up, man?
Kevin, it's great to be here, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for coming on, man, and making this happen. I'm excited to talk with you today and get your perspective on running pretty notable dispensary within, Massachusetts and Maine. Is that right?
Yeah, we're vertically integrated in Mass and Maine. And, like everybody else on the East Coast, looking towards the next dominoes that are following in some of these emerging markets next to us.
Yeah.
But it's a wild ride. And we were super fortunate for the last couple of years that have been put us on the map in certain ways.
Yeah, totally. And, we're going to get into all that. And let's first start with the ride, right? So, Thomas, tell us a little bit about your background. I mean,
Sure.
How did you get to where you're at as the VP of marketing for Theory Wellness?
Yeah. So, I'm originally from the Berkshires, actually, where I'm coming from today. And, I spent a lot of my time coming up through advertising and in New York. And I worked across a lot of different verticals, from pharmaceuticals to spirits, consumer packaged goods. And what was awesome about that was I got a lot of looks at different business problems to solve. So everything from how do you be really creative with pharmaceuticals, back in 2013 when, you can't do digital advertising, which is honestly pretty much the cannabis industry today.
Right.
And, over time, I kind of got to work on products that as I matured in my roles, it's like, I want to go work in something like, alcohol seems like a fun category. I was living in New York. I worked with Remy Martin for a few years and pretty much started to chase work that I was really interested in. And then my wife and I decided to move out west. She went to grad school and we lived in Laramie, Wyoming. And I've always been a huge fan of cannabis. I mean, since I was like 15, always was a cannabis user. Didn't really love alcohol as much as a lot of other folks. And after seeing the Colorado market and seeing the early days of 2014, 2015, and it was still kind of figuring itself out a little bit, I realized just, damn, like, can I do this for a living? Is this something that's possible? And so we ended up moving back to the East Coast. And during that time, I switched over and started working with, got my first marketing role, and a lot of what I learned from the agency side translated. And to be able to start to do this with one company that I was working with.
What was the role?
It was director of marketing for the largest yoga retreat center in North America.
Wow.
And it was, it was funny because I was there for about 6 months until the Theory job came up. And, and I'd kind of been like, okay, well, at some point I'm going to make this transition. But, right now this role was really great. It was a 360 role and with a really, really cool institution. But, 6 months in, and I knew one of the founders actually from high school. So growing up in the Berkshires, one of our two co-founders actually was in another high school, a private school. And he and I graduated the same year. We knew each other. And then when they opened up a job for director of marketing, it was like the stars aligned. And I had been talking to a mentor of mine who was like, well, what do you want to do? Like, what are you thinking about? I was like, I just love to go to work with a small, hungry company. And, I really want to find a place where I can apply a lot of the knowledge that I've developed over the last few years. And, you know, I interviewed with Theory on my 31st birthday, and the next day I got a call, and, you know, and the rest is history. And I mean, I always will remember this interview where it was so surreal as somebody who loves cannabis to sit down and sit at a table with founders and say, what do we call this? Like, what, I want to be really respectful. Do we call it marijuana or cannabis? And they're like, no, just call it cannabis and don't really worry too much about it. And, you know, and the rest is history. And so that was back in July of, you know, 2018. And so I'm coming up on, you know, this summer will be my 4-year anniversary. And I joined when Theory was 2 stores and it was all medical. And really the rest is history.
Wow. And so what did that process entail? Like first onboarding in 2018. I mean, how far along was Theory Wellness's branding? I mean, its voice,
Yeah.
its tone. I mean, was all that developed, or was that something that you had to take on and kind of work with the team to build out?
Well, to be honest, it was, you know, the one of the co-founders, Nick, who I work really closely with. This guy's got incredible taste. And what was wonderful was that the market, when you look at the longevity of a brand, you don't really understand how long it takes for a brand to really start to mature. The company first opened dispensaries, I think it was in, I want to say it was 2017 was when, you know, their first medical stores opened. And so they hadn't been in market for too long. But what was incredible was that they had these great bones of a brand, and they knew kind of the space that they wanted to be in, and they knew kind of where they wanted to go with this company. And that kind of rough clay for someone like me was fantastic because I immediately could understand, oh, like I get what you guys are going for.
There was some type of framework or something to work with, is what you're saying, that you could.
Totally. Yeah, there was a
Okay.
tone of voice and there's a really strong brand presence. And you know, and from there you kind of once you kind of digest a lot of what was, you know, what they were going for, you start to see kind of where it can go. And that for the last couple of years has been, you know, I mean, it's every marketer's dream. And you know, I always like reference this with some of my friends who are also marketers and who run brands. And you know, when you look at the Theory life, you know, the life cycle, we're a young brand still. I mean, they started in 2015. They didn't get open until 2017. So, you know, now we're maybe 5 years into this whole thing. The brand is still so young and it's growing, and we're learning a lot and applying that back in. But what's great about it is there was such a great foundation to start from. And then once we transition from medical into rec, and your audience kind of opens up and you're like, well, we were starting here and we were kind of very much focused on this medical audience. Now that there's an adult use recreational audience, well, now there are a lot more people who are looking at this brand. And so how does that influence what we do? And we're always kind of letting that evolution organically grow as much as we can, while, you know, really preserving where do we want to be in this space and how do we want to continue to define ourselves. And that's been one of the best things I think anybody can have as a marketer as you start to create a brand.
Yeah.
And one that becomes successful too, which we've been fortunate for.
Right. Well, I mean, let's dive into y'all's operations. So,
Yeah.
you know, as we talked about Maine, Massachusetts. So tell us a little bit about the footprints that y'all have within those 2 states. You know, what your customer base look like, what sales look like.
Yeah. So, you know, we in Massachusetts is probably, you know, it's where it all started. So our first store that flipped over to rec was in Great Barrington. It's, you know, when we opened, we were the 6th recreational dispensary on the East Coast. We were the closest one to New York City, which was insane. I mean, if you think about it, the perspective of, you know, if there were no liquor stores, you know, there's one liquor store outside of New York City, you can imagine the type of attention and volume you would get.
It's got to be crazy. It has to be insane.
Yeah, it's insane.
What? So, I mean, lines, I would imagine, all the time.
All the time. Yeah. I mean, it was one of those things where, you know, our company changed overnight. I mean, we went from the day before opening and being like, okay, like, what if nobody shows up? And, and we had that, I talked to I was like, what if nobody shows up?
No one, but did you realize? I mean, you had to have understood the location, the proximity to where you're at the time, and the potential of what that could bring.
We did. I mean, and we were kind of looking at this like, yeah, it would be awesome to have a big first day. And we thought it would be awesome to have a crowd. And we kind of thought that that would be the case. But, and what I did was, because I couldn't buy a ton of ads, I called almost every news desk from Red Hook, Brooklyn, all the way up to like Utica, New York. And I said, hey, the Berkshires is opening the first dispensary. This is a historic moment. We're neighboring you guys. And we ended up getting a lot of coverage. And, the day started with, heaps of press showing up that we were managing. And then the lines, the consumers, they came in droves. And what we were hoping, you always have to go in with a positive mindset of, yeah, we really hope that this is successful. But if it's not, it's also going to be okay because we're going to figure out a way to make it successful. And when you get to that step of success early, it almost becomes, the first step in a much bigger journey of, okay, well, now that we've figured this out, we got people who are waiting in line, we got people who are cold. How can we make this better? Let's go out, let's go get some coffees for these folks who are waiting in line. Let's start posting line updates. Let's start, reworking our menus. Let's figure out how we can get pre-order operating. And really from that day, everything just totally changed for us. And it was amazing. It was terrifying. It was exciting, and then we realized, okay, well, this is the new experience that we're going to have to figure out how to cater to. Mm-hmm. And it's great to an extent for people to wait in lines, because I think there's a psychological thing that's exciting to go wait for something that you're really kind of building up in anticipation. But then that also creates an expectation that you have to deliver on, and your products have to deliver on. And when you go home, you have to feel like that was worth it. And that becomes a whole nother psychological challenge to solve for as a company.
That's totally true. Cause like there could be a huge line, right? Like, and you could be the only location, like you mentioned, near New York City, at the time, or I don't know if that's still the case, but, to be able to buy it is one thing, but then to actually consume a product that's of high quality is another. And people notice that, right? Even if they buy it, they'll say, yeah, I got it, but they didn't deliver again. The weed was shitty again, or whatever the case may be. So tell us a little bit about that challenge. Yeah, the psychology of that for a brand and for a company.
Yeah. I think it's a really wide spectrum, right? First off, people are buying legal cannabis. A lot of them are buying for the first time. They're paying a 20% sales tax on an eighth, which they've never paid for from the black market. Nobody ever paid sales tax on a black market eighth, right? No. But where theories actually, where we kind of rose, I think where we prepared and we also rose to the occasion around was, our whole focus has always been on small batch craft cannabis. And that's really about finding really good genetics that we think are exciting and new, and working with really cool breeders who are doing some fantastic stuff with, the terpene profiles, the genetics side. And then also our cultivation was top notch too, and has continued to be top notch. And so when you start to put all these ingredients together, you actually carry that experience through to your consumer. And I think it could have very easily gone in different directions where, the pomp and circumstance and the shine wears off, and all of a sudden the honeymoon's over, and you're, and people may get hip to the fact that, maybe you don't have great products, but we've actually worked to improve our products. And I think we all collectively as an organization also felt like, damn, like we're here, so let's rise up to this and let's actually work harder to provide an even better experience. And let's really push the boundaries from our cultivation side to our marketing to our retail operations. And that's not an easy thing to do, but it's a lot easier when everybody's kind of committed to this mentality of, how do we get a lot better? And how do we make our products better? And how do we, use our data on a cycle of mimosa, on a phenotype, and how do we get a better terpene profile that's a couple of, 0.1% better from the last round? And that's kind of the company we are. And that's really led us to where, that person who waits in line for 45 minutes to come buy an ounce, they're going to be pretty happy with that ounce.
Mm-hmm.
And those lines, have honestly, until COVID, those lines continued. And even with competitors showing up, that's a really, really wonderful proposition for a company and a brand to be able to back it up. And that's, again, I think it comes back to the mentality of like, what is the kind of brand you're building and how do you keep people coming back?
Right.
How do you not be a flash in the pan?
Mm-hmm. Well, so, and, I want to get back to, so you talked about the first store that opened up in Massachusetts. So, and you, where else is your footprint in Massachusetts and also in Maine?
So great question. So right now, Bridgewater was our first store, and it's medical only. The town had put an embargo on adult use, and so Great Barrington was medical as well. It transitioned to rec. So probably in February of 2019 or 2020, right before COVID hit, we had opened our second location, which was the first new location I'd been a part of in Chicopee, Mass, which is Central Mass. We were open for 5 weeks. COVID hit. They shut down all the dispensaries, all the rec dispensaries in Mass. So it was kind of a false start. And then, 2 months later, it kicked back up. And then October of 2020 as well.
So let me pause you right there. During that COVID time when things opened back up and you talked about, like the line issue and all that, like was a lot of that solved after like post COVID with like, I would imagine like, delivery or not delivery, but I guess like pickup, curbside pickup.
Yeah, it's, it was one of those times where when they shut down the business, we all kind of, the executive team, we all kind of like sat down and we're like, okay, well, this is obviously a huge challenge to overcome. And it was, honestly, it was hard. It was a brutal time because, we had people were out of work from us, they were furloughed, which was really brutal. And we didn't really know when it was going to come to an end or what. And so where we see this, like, okay, well, we really have to rethink what we're going to do and how do we come out of this, and how do we come firing out of this when the time comes. And when I mean firing, not just to like pump people through, but like, how do we continue the same level of brand equity at a scale at which people have to be distanced 6 feet apart with 40% capacity, with all these challenges. And so during that time, we did a lot of work to improve pre-order systems. Shout out to the guys at Dutchy. I worked really, really closely with Zach Lipsum, who's one of the founders of Dutchy, to figure out, okay, like, let's implement appointment time slots. So before, it's like your pre-order was, you place your order, you get a text, and you show up and get it. Well, that shit's not going to work when, people are showing up between 6 and 8, which is the highest time for people to come through. You can't have all your customers come through at one time.
Right.
So we reached out to Zach, and we were talking to Zach, and we were like, I said to him, like, let's get some appointment time slots going. Let's get, hourly time slots. Can we also have a setting in there that we can control the cap of number of orders per hour so we can disperse, our visits. And we started to get into this realm of innovation that was wild. And, not only did a lot of these upgrades start to come out as we were getting ready to open, but we also were like, we decided that we were going to move forward with putting in one of the first drive-up pickup windows at our Chicopee dispensary, where people could stay in their car and place an order, come pick it up at the window. And, and again,
that's awesome. They have that in Texas, but for alcohol.
Yeah, when I lived in Wyoming, they had the same thing. Like, they drive through alcohol pickup windows.
Yeah.
And
so why not for cannabis? I mean, that makes sense.
Totally. And it's one of those things that it was like, would we have gotten there without COVID? Like, it's hard to say. Like, I think it's one of those things that's like a pipe dream until it has like feasibility behind it. And and again, I think when we opened back up, we had done a couple of different approaches of like, we tried doing drive up or at least like car service, curbside services, and that wasn't as efficient. You know, we ended up setting up a tent in our parking lot where we had people socially distanced. And I mean, and it was just one of these like massive productions. And one of the great things about Theory is that, you know, it's not like we got to run something up the chain. You know, our two co-founders, you know, were on site with us and we're watching the first day of Curbside and kind of like, you know what, I think we can probably do this better. Like, let's see, what if we got a tent? Yeah, a tent's a good idea. How many stations could we get out there? I think we could probably get 10. All right, well, what would we need to do to hardwire? Well, we could drill a hole here and you know, and then it's like all of a sudden we're 24 hours later pivoting the entire operations. I got comms going out and you know, and
Yeah.
it was tough, but I think we leveraged it and figured out like how do we continue to keep the same experience without, you know, in really adverse times.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was just really a time where the cannabis industry shined. You know, I mean, everybody basically figured it out. And, you know, when cannabis was deemed essential, it was like, okay, let's follow the guidelines that are put in place and continue to serve our patients, right? Whether on the medical side or the consumers that consume on the recreation side. So that's good to hear. One thing that you said really kind of sparks my interest, and that's how you talked about kind of the agility. I'll put
Yeah.
it that way of you working with the co-founders. I mean, you guys are a private company, right? So
Yeah.
you're not answering to stakeholders, but there's MSO giants around you that are publicly traded, right, in these states in which you operate.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what is that perspective like? I mean, how does that all work?
Honestly, it's, you know, we talk about it a lot and, you know, when we talk about it, it's more so we understand the perspective and the scale in which these guys are operating. They have capital, they have resources, they have, you know, they're really primed in these markets. And where we realize that the opportunity for us is that we have to stay very focused on our operations, that, you know, we're able to run in a way that they're not able to, in terms of the nimbleness, the agility, as you mentioned. And really, you know, part of it is we're not out there to be the MSO or be an MSO that is looking for global domination. What we're really looking for is to increase access to cannabis. And we think that we're a company that should be at the table to help do that, because at the end of the day, what we're looking to do is we're trying to provide the cannabis experience that we all as cannabis enthusiasts want to have as consumers. And that really drives so much of what we do.
And what is that in your view?
Yeah, so I mean, we look a lot at, you know, our approach to trying to find more sustainable ways to run our operation. So sustainability is really, I think, something that we look at as like a big benchmark for as we do our strategic planning annually. We think about, okay, well, how can we be maybe a little bit cleaner with the environment? We launched one of the first outdoor cultivations on the East Coast for a rec brand, just to minimize the footprint that we had from an environmental standpoint. We're always looking at replacing our packaging with, you know, cardboard or anything that does not have plastic that can be recyclable. And that's just kind of who we are. I mean, we all love the outdoors. We love we love what we're doing, but also like we're in the business of agriculture that comes down to a plant.
Right.
And if we're not being conscious of, you know, where it's all coming from, then, you know, it's a pretty grim future. And I think also we focus a lot on the details of these operations. And we have more conversations when it comes to building a floor plan about what is the ideal flow for the consumer. You know, and I don't know that everybody has those conversations. And we're in a point where, you know, it's almost a privilege to be a company where we can really have a very robust conversation about what is the best way to make this work for our consumers. And we'll ask them too. I mean, we'll put polls out and we'll ask for specific feedback about a product that we're launching. And when we look at our R&D and we look at our product pipeline, a lot of it comes down to what do we see the market wants, and also like what do we as consumers think is really like fun and cool, and what do we want to be a part of.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that every operation can do that in the way that we are. And we also ask our staff too. Like we poll our staff on, we recently polled our staff on, what should we name this new product that we have coming out? And we ran a poll to get, out of 10 options of names and let people weigh in. And I think that's kind of where it's exciting for us, because we're not pricing products against a bottom line for our EBITDA or our total evaluation. For the most part, we're really thinking about like what's going to be the best consumer experience, because the best consumer experience is going to be the one that stays with people and brings them back. And if you can do that, it almost doesn't really matter what your forecasting is for revenue, because if you can build a brand that people care about and want to be a part of and come back to, you're going to hit those business goals. And, will that mentality change as we scale and we grow? Probably. It's almost impossible to not have that be impacted, but we've been incredibly fortunate to kind of preserve that mentality of, this is the kind of store that any of us would want to shop in. Like when we finish a design of a store, we're like, damn, like this is awesome. Like we're really excited.
And that's how small batch cannabis should be, right? I mean, it should hold true to the values of the company and the processes in which they want to cultivate the flower, or
Yeah.
extract the product in the most sustainable way. And it's great that you call that out, because that is something that I think a true cannabis consumer does think about, because that's really what the plant's about. I mean, the plant enriches the soil when you put it in the ground, right? I mean, there's a lot of good that this plant gives to the environment in terms of intaking CO2 emissions and other things. So
Yeah.
it's only right that we kind of, like you said, preserve that that mentality,
Yeah.
especially as you guys get bigger, which inevitably I think will happen. So just to recap, how many so is it one dispensary in each state, or is there multiple dispensaries? And then how many employees are with Theory Wellness?
Yeah. So we have a total of 3 dispensaries in Massachusetts. Three of those dispensaries, all 3 dispensaries are medical. 2 of them are recreational. So you can have a total of 6 licenses an operator, 3 medical and 3 rec. So we have 5 out of those 6. There's 1 recreational license left in Massachusetts. In Maine, it's all recreational, and we have three locations up there. And Maine was the first step in becoming an MSO. And it's funny because like when you think about, we are a private MSO, but it's like private MSO is almost like an oxymoron. Like there's just not a lot of, there aren't a ton of private MSOs who are out doing what we're doing. And it gets back to your point about like, we're in a sea of giants right now, and we love it. I mean, and honestly, as a marketer, this is being a challenger brand is the best thing in the world, because nobody is, you know all the big names, and you know all these big operators, and it's kind of nice to be the one who's it's better to be discovered than announced, I think, in a lot of ways, as you
The dark horse.
a little bit, yeah. And I think we have that, and I also think like our employees know that and they feel that, and it does
And it fires them up, probably. I mean, they probably like that.
hugely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I sit with my, we just finished up our reviews, with my marketing team in the last week, and it's amazing talking to them, because I think for a team of our size, I mean, what we're doing is like, it's a really special thing, and it's really, really fun, and we're getting it right, and we're figuring it out, and we're starting to really understand, the brand growth, and it's fun to be, nobody's really looking out for you. Nobody has expectations about where you can go, and that's the best part, because it's almost like you can be whatever you want to be. There's not going to be a quarterly earnings call that Marketplace covers or Bazinga covers. It's kind of like, oh damn, like Theory Wellness is a challenger brand in the cannabis space that's been very successful, and we've done it because a lot of that mentality of we want to be a player, but we're also not going to get up and announce ourselves to the markets that we're into. And I think we're the top rec brand in both states that we're in, which is awesome.
Yeah. that is huge, and that's something that y'all should be proud of. And I gotta say, you being the VP of marketing, y'all's Twitter is on point, man. Um, no, seriously, it is. I was so
Awesome.
impressed with the images that y'all share. The different photos of the flower and operations. And I'm actually for those that are watching this episode, I'm gonna share my screen so that
Amazing.
you can see what I'm talking about. Please tell me, Thomas, if you're seeing. Are you seeing this?
I'm seeing it. Yeah.
Okay. So just for example, like, okay, you've got this is indoor, right? So
Yeah.
indoor cultivation, just there's just a worker kind of standing in front of these aisles of bud. But look at the color on some of this flower. It's just
Yeah.
incredible. This is what the chocolope.
Chocolate. Yeah. Yeah. And it's honestly, it's something that we put so much focus on, you know,
Yeah,
you
like this
see a
one
lot of.
here looks like Skittles.
Yeah,
It's like,
so this is insane. So this cherry punch is cherry AK-47 crossed with purple punch, and purple punch is just notoriously, it's one of those purple plants that just looks so incredible. And yeah, the AK-47 crossed with the purple punch, you just get this wonderful expression of the genetics that, I mean, it's one of the most photogenic plants that, we have the on staff content strategist who's our photographer. It was one of the first times that I had gone through a photo album to kind of review selects on, and it was the perfect album where everything was just every photo from the rooms that she was in were fantastic.
yeah,
Um,
it's incredible. So for those that are just listening, check out Theory Wellness on Twitter. You'll, have the opportunity to share, your channels at the end here, but
awesome.
it's good stuff, man. So definitely, whatever your team's doing, keep it up on that and that front, because you don't see a lot of, I don't see a lot of image sharing on Twitter, which is kind of
Yeah,
weird because I know it's very conversational based, but there's room for photos like that. I think that work well.
I mean, with
But
the way that social media treats cannabis brands, it's probably one of like the only protected sanctuaries for cannabis photos.
that's
We
true,
just
actually.
we
Yeah,
lost
it's
our account. We lost our account about 3 weeks ago. It was down for about
uh
10 days. Sorry,
for
and I meant
what? What was the reasoning? What, I always have to
Instagram.
ask this.
Yeah, so we lost our Instagram account, and
But what was the reason? Did they tell you? Did you know why?
no. So actually, the photo of the guy in the grow. So that's Mike Peretra, and Mike is probably like he this guy spending time with this guy in the grow is one of the best educational points you can possibly have in cannabis, because this guy knows cannabis plants like they're old friends from high school, where your friend from high school has all these like stories about you that only he could know.
Yeah.
Mike's kind of the same way with his plants, where he knows
They
these
tell each
plants.
other secrets.
I sometimes I'm like, he is a plant whisperer when I'm like, damn dude, and I'll go through the grow and I'll be like, Mike, why is this run of chocolate or blackjack, like this one's looking really stacked, what's happening? He's like, well, I know that like, the environmentals previously we have the humidity a little bit higher. So I actually thought I wanted to cool it down a little bit. And this room circulates different. And all of a sudden you're just
It's
like,
like way over your head. You're like,
yeah,
okay, I just asked you one question, man, and he like gave you the whole, because there's so many variables that are going on in his head, right? Like,
totally. Yeah.
yeah,
And he's super dialed, and honestly, I give him so much credit for where we're at today, because, you need that. You need somebody, this is
oh
indoor
yeah, for
agriculture at the end
sure,
of the day. You know,
yeah,
you can run rooms and produce flower. I mean, anybody can do that, but to do it at the way that Mike has done it and to produce the quality that he has, there's a special sauce to it. And it's wonderful, because when you're, as a marketer, I always encourage my team, when you're in the grow and you're shooting those photos, make sure you're asking Mike questions. Like, you got to learn this, because if you're going to market it, you have to
You gotta
understand it.
understand it. That's very important. You're absolutely right, man. Because, and we talked about earlier, there's things that people can see through. And if you're marketing something or advertising a product or a solution, a technology solution that you don't understand or you can't explain to like a, you know, a 5-year-old or like a fifth grader, right? Like, um, then you better learn about it, because it's no
Yeah,
one's gonna understand what you're talking about. It won't resonate.
totally. And this is a new market, man. And it's like, if your marketing team is not actively educating your consumers, then your consumers are not going to benefit. And it's also like, it's our responsibility as a cannabis company.
Mhm.
Like, we should be explaining, like, we should be pushing people to have discerning tastes about the products they consume in the cannabis market. You know, we want that. Like, I want people to come in with an opinion about a product.
Yeah.
I want them to find something that works for them. I want to know if it doesn't work with them. So we also, my team also, I oversee our customer service, and that's a huge part of what we're also very focused on. Is there's not a single person that reaches out to us that doesn't get a response, unless it's outside of hours. Most people get a response within minutes, because we want to make sure that, like, you asked about our audience earlier. We got everybody. I used to, when we first opened for rec, I would go stand in that massive line and I would just talk to as many people as possible.
Were a lot of them at that time, because I know that was in your early days, so were a lot of them kind of curious, like were they just like, what is this about, what, or
Totally.
were they pretty like, or was there a mix of like vets too, seasoned vets?
Yeah, you had everybody. You had people who were like the heady home grows who were just like, I want to see what this is all about. And then you had like, like, I call them like my dad, like the people of my dad's generation, who's, from, the 60s, and would just like love to be like, for 40, I've been smoking cannabis for 40 years and I never thought I'd see the day that I'd come and buy it off of a menu. And then, and then you got these like the little old ladies who are, in their 70s, who are like my grandson, or 80s. And like, my grandson told me that, CBD might help with like my muscle soreness from my like hip replacement. And you're like, great. Like, where can we start? What do
Yeah.
you think you need? And what was funny is that early on, I was keeping very close tabs on the audience growth. And, the 25 to 34-year-olds were the core basis of visitors. And that's kind of like, that's understandable.
Mm-hmm.
And then 35 to 44 and 45 to 54, they were close, not far behind. And then, one of the fastest growing segments was like the 55 plus and the 65 plus. And like, that to me was a huge win.
You're
All of a
not
sudden,
you're not the only one that said that, Thomas. And
really?
no, you're not. And I think, and I can't remember who said it, I apologize, but we were kind of talking through it, and I think what we came to the conclusion was is that a lot of these 55 and up are, or did you say, is that the range, 55 and
Yeah,
up? Yeah. Like, so these older folks, they're tired of the prescription medication that they're on,
totally.
right?
Yeah,
Like, and I'm
100%.
not saying that there's not efficacy with what they're taking, but in a lot of ways it gives them side effects that could be, could discomfort them and not help their daily life, right? It kind of
Yeah,
hinders their life, their well-being. So cannabis doesn't have side effects, right? There is no hangover, there's no grogginess. I mean, THC of course has psychoactive properties if you're going to get high, but CBD, like you mentioned, doesn't, right?
yeah.
And there's anti-inflammatory properties and other things to help with anxiety. So that's so interesting that you're, and of course, I mean, as a marketer, you're tracking this data, which is vital, right? But
Yeah.
you're not the only one that's talked about that
Yeah.
particular segment that's growing.
I
You
mean,
know.
I also think that these folks just finally have permission to try this.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's one of those things where, you know, I think about my grandfather, who, was like like my dad was like a stoner as a like growing up. And, again, like, born in 57, 58. And, his dad was in the war and just like vehemently opposed to cannabis and thought it was some horrible thing. And then, and then all of a sudden, if you're conditioned to think that way, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh wait, maybe it's not that bad. like there's going to be an inherent curiosity of like, well, this company is selling cannabis in my town, and all these people are showing up for it, and they're putting a lot of money into like the tax pool for our town. Like maybe there's something there for me.
Is isn't it amazing how well like they did on the prohibition side to basically interject so much stigma and like fear, right? And like blurring the lines of what a real Schedule One narcotic is versus cannabis, right? Like it's
Yeah,
pretty fascinating because it's really hit an entire generation. And to your point, like they're coming out of the shadows, out of the out of the woodwork. Like, well, wait, like this is legal now. This is okay, and
totally.
that's a powerful thing, right? Because that was, I mean, in some cases, in some states, right, or municipalities, it still is like that. In some cases, I mean, in terms of the law, and of course, there's still people locked up, but
Yeah,
it's
and that's
crazy, man.
yeah, it's crazy. And I mean, you're seeing that in New York too. I mean, a lot of municipalities are opting out of allowing cannabis sales, and like that to me is like, you know,
Yeah, seems to happen, right? Like, there's just some that say no, I don't want it. We
but
don't want this.
hey, that's democracy in
Right,
motion.
right,
It's
and
like more
yes.
power to you. If you do not want it and your town says no, then like, good, you shouldn't have it, and you don't need to have it.
I
Like,
agree. I agree. I don't. What I don't agree with though is like in California, isn't there some municipalities that even go as far as to say you can't drive on our roads to transport, or you can't, like, in some cases, like if it's out of the way, I get it. They don't want it anywhere near their town, but if it is in a conflicting area where you have to transport through, or you have to get over a bridge, or you have to pass some town, I mean, that's that's just not helping the overall industry, which if that's
no,
fine if they don't want to, but hey, that's tax revenue for their city and their
totally.
kids, public schools or whatever it could be.
Yeah.
So
No, and I mean, and I don't know the extreme of that scenario, but and again, it's kind of like, well, like that's fine. And I think we donated in the first year of operations, first 2 years, maybe like $3 million to the town of Great Barrington. It's a town of 8,000 people, and all of a
damn.
sudden you're like, okay, so where does that money go? Okay, that's getting pumped into your general infrastructure for schools, roads. We had police officers who not getting were paid directly by theory, who were picking up additional shifts. And I mean, Kevin, I was one of our opening days. I'm in the back vault with a police officer who had to use the bathroom, and I made him a cup of coffee, and I'm standing there, and we're drinking coffees. The guy's in full uniform, and there's literally hundreds of pounds of cannabis around us, and you're just
That
like,
is a beautiful thing. I am picturing it in
oh
my head. It's a beautiful image that I'm seeing of this officer with his gun and everything, drinking coffee, taking a piss in your bathroom, because it's a business. It's a legitimate business
and
that
he's picking
serves
up
patients. Yeah.
dollars because he's getting paid on top of his scheduled time. This is like time and a half for these guys because this is voluntary shifts. And these
Yeah.
guys, and I it's crazy because I spent so much time, we're so focused on it when we were opening. Spent so much time with these guys, and these guys are like, this is awesome. You're just like,
But when you, yeah,
like, yo, this is awesome. Like, yeah, it is awesome. Like, I'm really glad that you say this, and I'm glad that you're here, and I'm glad we're talking about this because, and our consumers, which is funny too, because our consumers are like,
what is
yo, are they
going on?
writing our license plates down? Like, are we?
Yeah, are you guys getting busted right now?
Yeah, and it's like, and we're like,
yeah.
no, no, no. Like, these guys are here for you. Like, they want to make sure that you can pull out of our driveway safely. Like, they want to make sure you're gonna get home safe. Like, they're not
That's beautiful.
and again, it's just like, I think this is this growing trend where, yeah, I'm not surprised 65 and plus is a common thread across the country. I think, we're going to continue to see this industry take hold, and the more and more people start to get open to it, the better. And truthfully, I tell my customer service teams, the best job we can do as customer service is to take the person who is skeptical or who has massive gripes, And we bring them into our stores and we show them and we teach them about what we're doing. And a lot of people, when they come in, they go, whoa, this is actually like kind of a nice retail store. It's like an Apple store. And they think they and they don't really know how to perceive because it's so far removed from them. I mean, it's just a wonderful thing. And I think that's what also just why a lot of people are in the industry today, is because we're giving a new name to something that has had its name dragged through the mud for generations. And we're finally changing that. And I think that's why there's a lot of focus on the industry today. And I think it's a good thing. And I hope it continues.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more, Thomas. And as we wrap up, I want to ask you, so is there, as you're swimming in the sea of giants, as you continue to swim in the East Coast, are there any other states that you're looking to expand to? Like what's up next? What are y'all focused on
Oh, man.
in this year as we
Yeah.
close?
Well, I mean, I think first and foremost, we're always every year we're focused on the existing operations and figuring out how can we do them better, because you can always improve. So that's kind of the first thing. When it comes to expansion, I mean, we are looking at everything. And when I say everything, I mean, New Jersey is, is legalizing for rec. New York's legalizing for rec. New Hampshire is heading there. Vermont's heading there. I mean, and these are all states, and a lot of what we're at is there are some states that are lined up right now that I can't speak about. That are, I have 3 different retail projects in the works as we speak. And a lot of it comes down to where do we think that theory is going to have the best growth around. And it's almost like when there are so many lanes, it comes down to discipline. And that's what our roadmap is. We are going to be very disciplined about which directions, which states we're going to go after, because we're also a small team. As I said, we can't double our head count overnight and just, run into a deficit on our budgets. We've got to be very cautious about how you scale, and we have to preserve the brand, and we have to protect the brand, and we have to be disciplined about how do we protect that. And so scaling becomes the next iteration of growth for us. It's going to be in multiple markets. Those markets are going to be strategically selected based on where we think that we can continue the experience of the brand and maintain the integrity of the brand we started with. If we had wanted to, I'm sure we could have sold this company and then been consolidated, and Theory could have scaled exponentially, not as a privately owned company. But holding on to that and using that as our North Star, we're being very selective about how does that scaling take place, which markets it's going to be in, and really ones that we know that we can effectively do correctly. And I don't know, I think every cannabis company on the East Coast is thinking the same thing. Ours becomes a lot more of a question of how can we preserve what we've done and continue to do what we do without sacrificing anything along the way. That's the hardest part to scale. And that's the hardest part of the challenge that we're in now, of with so many different opportunities, with so much money coming into this industry, with so many acquisitions and mergers. How does Theory continue where we've been in the last 3 years? And what do the next 3 years look like? And I will tell you this, the one thing I can say is that it's not going to be anything about sacrificing the brand or the quality or how we're going to position ourselves. So it's a non-answer to a great question, but that's unfortunately as far as I can go, because we're literally every day having conversations about some of these markets.
No, you gave me something here. You gave the audience something to chew on, and I appreciate it. And it sounds like, like you said, preserve what you're good at and stay the course. Continue to be focused and be strategic in where you want to set the next stake in the ground when it comes to expansion. So,
Totally.
Thomas, really appreciate your time, man. Your insights, you explaining the company and your role within Theory Wellness. Where can people find y'all's website and social media if they want to learn more?
Yeah. So, you can find us on, search us on Google, Theory Wellness, theorywellness.org. Come to our website, check out what we have going on. Our Instagram is back. So definitely check that out. That really is a really great way to look at the timeline of the growth of the company, because the way that we've documented, I think, has been really exciting. Find us on Twitter, LinkedIn, anywhere. And, if you're in Mass or Maine and you want to come check us out, we'd love to see y'all. And especially, as we start to grow, hopefully, maybe for some of your listeners or viewers, maybe we'll be coming to a new state near you. Who knows?
Nice. Well, you heard it here first from Thomas. And yeah, check out the website. There is amazing apparel. You guys' shirts and hats are really cool because you have a really awesome logo. So I encourage you guys to check that out. And we'll drop the links in the YouTube box below. But Thomas, thanks again. Really enjoyed it. And thank you all for listening. Bye.